Yes, welcome everyone. It's Cannabis News. I'm your host, Joe Klare. It's December 23rd, 2019. It is Christmas week. Merry Christmas to everyone out there who celebrates Christmas or Christmas week or whatever you're celebrating, whatever holidays. Happy holidays to you. Today we're talking about New Jersey, and they're looking at a vote for legalization next year. Also, a new group is coming together to set standards for marijuana products, and millions of Americans are driving under the influence of cannabis. What is to be done about that? All of that is coming up. First, of course, Cannabis News is brought to you by Natureside, nature-side.com, and their organic, all-natural pesticides grow safe and poison-free with Natureside. Don't use harmful chemicals or banned pesticides. Instead, use Natureside. Nature-side.com, a proud sponsor of Cannabis News. Thank you, Natureside, for your continued awesomeness and sponsorship of the show. This first story is by Julia Granowitz at marijuanatimes.org. New Jersey lawmakers will put cannabis legalization in the hands of voters in 2020. They agreed to let voters decide, the legislature that is, whether the state is ready for adult use cannabis by voting to put the question on the 2020 ballot. Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin, a Democrat, said in a statement, quote, "Putting the issue into a referendum is both sensible and equitable. While not a preferred method of legislating, public questions allow voters to affirm or deny massive shifts in public policy." The question needed a 3/5 majority vote in both the Senate and the House. Got 24 votes in the Senate and 49 votes in the Assembly. Were enough to get it to the ballot next year. If they hadn't got enough votes, it would have had to wait another year, and it had to get a simple majority in that case. The question voters will see in November 2020 would read like this. Quote, "Do you approve of amending the Constitution to legalize a controlled form of marijuana called cannabis?" That's worded badly to begin with. Marijuana is not a form of marijuana called cannabis. It should be a form of cannabis called marijuana, if you want to be technical, or at least more accurate. So that's a bad start. Only adults at least 21 years of age could use cannabis. The State Commission, created to oversee the state's medical cannabis program, would also oversee the new personal use cannabis market. Cannabis products would be subject to state sales tax. If authorized by the legislature, a municipality may pass a local ordinance to charge a local tax on cannabis products. So it's looking like New Jersey, and I hesitate to say this because we talked about New Jersey legalizing and attempting to legalize it a lot for most of this year, and it never happened. So I hesitate to say, well, next year it looks like you get to decide on it because, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Oh, I know my breath. That's for sure. This next story from prnewswire.com, meaning it is a press release. Global Alliance for Cannabis Commerce announced nationwide GACC certified testing and purity standards program for cannabis products, response to vape-related illness outbreak. We've talked a lot about regulations and the need for regulations and standards in the legal cannabis industry, and there's a couple ways to do this, or at least a couple ways that have been established to do this in other industries and with other commodities, is the government regulations, which everybody seems to be so gung-ho on. I'm not a huge fan of those. I'm more interested in voluntary standards groups, voluntary regulations, seals of approval. Various industry companies get together and create these standards, and if you meet these standards, you can join their group and get their seal, get to use their seal of approval. If not, you don't. We do it all the time for many, many different products. As I said, now the Global Alliance for Cannabis Commerce, which is a trade organization representing a major cross-section of the global cannabis industry, announced the launch of a nationwide voluntary industry certification standard for safety and purity in cannabis product testing. It's expected by the end of 2020, this program will be available to all state-licensed cannabis operations. And people will say, well, you know, these people, they only want you to buy their stuff and so on and so forth, and they'll skew things to be in favor of them. Well, look, they have incentive for this seal, this standard, to become an industry standard, for people to trust this standard. It's better for their business. If you screw up a regulation or something screwed up with the government oversees something and they don't do it right or whatever, people rarely get fired. There's not going to be any huge backlash. There's not going to be any consequences for that. But if people in this group, they say they meet the standards, but somebody finds out that they don't, or there's some expose on 60 Minutes or whatever, that's going to hurt the entire group. So they're going to police each other a lot more, and with a lot more incentive than they would be policed by the government. The government, they go in there, they check the boxes, they do what they're supposed to do, whatever. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, because as I said, there's no consequences. If a government overseer screws something up, then that's it. They move on to something else. There's no consequences, there's no repercussions, there's nothing. But if this group, if their standards are not met, and their seal or their standards are tarnished, or their images seem to be tarnished, that's a problem for them. So they have incentive to adhere to these standards, whereas the only incentives they have to adhere to government regulations are however much the government looks into it. They're not going to rat on themselves. The government's overseeing things, and that's one thing. But the government has no incentive to do that because it doesn't matter to them. This makes it important for these people. That's why I'm, for many reasons, much more in favor of voluntary industry associations and setting standards and things and like that than the government, leaving it all to the government and saying, well, the government will take care of it, because it creates a false sense of security. Because most of the time the government is indeed not taking care of it. You think they are, but they're not. And what are you left with? Well, our bad. We didn't take care of this. But what are you going to do about it? You're going to vote out the person at the USDA? Of course not. You don't even know who that person is. Excuse me. Current law makes it impossible to assure the public that every one of the 33 states where cannabis has been legalized, that there's a uniform accepted standards for safety and purity, even though customers or consumers may well use legal products when in different states until federal law is corrected. The program will continue. The problem will continue to exist. That's another problem I would see with cannabis, is that there's no federal oversight whatsoever. It's state by state, and this will hopefully create some kind of national standard for product testing and things like that. And I hope so. I'm more and more voluntary associations creating standards. That is what is needed. This last story is from CNN.com. Millions of Americans are driving under the influence of marijuana, according to the CDC. Shock. Gasp. I'm gasping over here from my shock. I'm sorry, that's a bit much on the sarcasm front. The most recent national estimates of drivers who operated a car under the influence of marijuana put the numbers in the millions, according to a new report from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The new Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report found that in 2018, I'm sorry, it's a real downer of a report, and I didn't get my copy, if I may be so bold, to alert customer service for the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. 12 million American adults said they had driven under the influence of weed. The 12 months prior to the survey, about 2.3 million said they had driven under the influence of illicit drugs such as cocaine or methamphetamines. Breaks down to about 4.7% of Americans driving under the influence of weed, and 0.9% driving under the influence of other drugs. The percentage is much smaller than the number of drivers who said they drove under the influence of alcohol, which was about 8%. People most likely to say they used pot before driving were people in the 21 to 25 age group. Next came the 16 to 20 age group. The demographic most likely to drive under the influence of marijuana are non-Hispanic multiracial persons at 9.2%. If you really want to break it down and get into the numbers here, let's get into the numbers. The non-Hispanic multiracial persons, they're the problem. I'm not even 100% sure what that means. Non-Hispanic, okay, I get that. And then multiracial. So they're multiracial, but one of those races is non-Hispanic. So white and black, so on and so forth down the line as far as, races and things of that nature, I guess, is that. I don't know what the purpose of that number is. I don't know how that helps us. Knowing that 9.2% of those drivers are non-Hispanic multiracial persons. If that helps you tackle the problem, then by all means, go ahead. The authors of the report say the number of impaired drivers should prompt public health officials to develop tools quickly to quickly identify if a driver is operating under the influence of weed or other drugs. Obviously, technologically, there's many, many things in the works as far as trying to figure out if someone's used cannabis recently and they're driving, or if they're impaired. We're still not there yet scientifically. There's no number that can get in your blood, as we've discussed before. They'll tell them how impaired you are when it comes to cannabis, but rest assured they are working on it. Several companies are working on it. We're here 5 days a week on Cannabis News, marijuanatimes.org. Search the Marijuana Times on YouTube. You can find us on Apple Podcasts as well. Thank you to Natureside, nature-side.com, and their organic, all-natural pesticides. Thank you all for sharing and spreading the truth about cannabis with this show and liking and commenting on the videos. Please continue to do so. Thanks for watching and listening today, and we'll see you next time right here on Cannabis News.